Perfect.
All right, everybody, welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk. Of course, this is the show we cover the SWAC inside and out, and I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. C. Wells coming at you. And today we're gonna take a very, very unofficial look at SWAC Offensive Lines. If you're looking for the in-depth, there's plenty of places to find that, but this is just kind of a really rough overview of what everybody's bringing back on the offensive lines. I know a lot of everybody talks about the skill guys and. You got this quarterback coming in, you got these receivers coming in, you got, this, that, and the other. But when you don't have anybody to protect those guys and open up holes for those guys, then your offense doesn't look good. So we're just going to take an overview of everybody's offensive line coming into the 2023 season. Again, this is very rough, very, very off the cuff, just kind of getting it started. So with that being said, man, once y'all hit those socials that are on the screen down below, Facebook is SWAC Talk, Instagram SWAC Talk, Twitter SWAC Talk 76. Don't forget to hit that Patreon, patreon.com/SWAC Talk. We have a $3 level that allows you to be a part of a members-only group chat and being able to suggest topics for SWAC Talk and SWAC Smoke. Also, we have a $5 level that allows you to have those two perks as well as be live on an edition of SWAC Smoke. On a members roundtable at the end of the month. So if you want to participate in both of those, it's patreon.com/SWAC Talk. Also, thank you for supporting the channel by subscribing. We're over 915 subscribers, making our way up to 1,000. So thank you very much for that. If you haven't subscribed yet, man, and you like these kind of videos, and you like, what we do on SWAC Smoke, then once you hit that subscribe button and rock with us, because we're going to continue to bring you a lot of good heat. Also hit that notification bell to be alerted when these videos drop. Like the videos and share them, and feel free to comment your thoughts on offensive line play coming into the 2023 season. So I kind of try to do this, that obviously there's no real recorded stats on the stat sheet. I mean, for offensive line play, you got blocking grades and things. You want to go to PFF, but I didn't do that. But there's really not a lot of ways to judge a line other than eye test and looking at some of the numbers from other aspects of a team. So a lot of people don't talk about the offensive line when they look at a team's predictions and things for the upcoming season. I mean, you got a lot of talented, skilled guys and no O-line, you really gonna struggle. You got a really solid O-line, you can get the most out of mediocre guys behind them because they can get a quarterback time to throw. They can open a hole for a running back up, to run through, and give them receivers time to get open. So obviously, a good offensive line, or at least an adequate offensive line, is the difference between winning and losing. So what I did was I just kind of went down each team's roster, and I'm not gonna go on a roster rant again because some people still don't have 23 rosters up. But I tried to go through and figure out who's returning and how many guys that they have coming back that have started at least a game. Because to me and a lot of other people who really look at football at a much deeper level, they know that continuity on the offensive line is probably one of the biggest keys on the line. Sometimes even more than talent. Your offensive line has to be able to work together. They have to be able to know each other's movements. They have to be able to know the ins and outs of an offense. And that doesn't always come with talent. That comes with time and reps and working together. So you could have 5 all-star guys and put them together, and they don't play well until mid-season because it takes time for a line to gel. That's why you see in a all-star setting that a whole line is always going to be weak link on the group because they don't have the time to work together and kind of know each other and kind of know the intricacies of an offense. So looking at we'll start with Alabama A&M, and we'll look at what their offensive line basically helped do last season. They one other thing I'm looking at stats overall and conference stats because sometimes looking at overall stats, you got a lot of teams play 2 FBS games or they play a couple lower division teams, so numbers are mad skewed. But when you look at conference only stats, you get a kind of a better idea of who these teams are because they're playing like opponents multiple weeks. So I'm kind of looking at both for my numbers. So looking at Alabama A&M offensively, in conference play, they averaged 412 yards per game. On the ground, they actually had a really solid running game. They averaged 188 yards per game on the ground in conference play. Backs averaged 4.7 yards per carry. So they did a really good job of opening up holes for the backs, Donovan Eaglin especially. The passing game was 4th in the league. They threw the ball for 224 yards per game. And they did a pretty solid job with protecting the quarterbacks. In conference play, they only allowed 12 sacks. Overall, last season, they allowed 24 sacks. So they allowed 12 sacks in three non-conference games and 12 sacks in 8 conference games. So as you can see, they did a very good job in SWAC play of protecting the quarterback. This line is returning 4 guys that started at least one game. So they do have some guys coming back with some experience that, they, like I said, they should be a lot better this season. Quarterback play is going to have to improve, but that's not what we hear right now. But just looking at where they were last season, they did lose some guys, but I think that they'll be able to bring in some guys who have played a lot and played together a lot and start to gel that way. And we'll see if they can continue to develop because this was an offense that, even with all their flaws, they still were a really solid offense. This still was an offense that was 3rd overall in total offense last season. Even with the inconsistencies and the struggle that they had in non-conference play. So they are an offense that can be good if the offensive line continues to get better. Looking at the Hornets of Big Bama State, they had some offensive line issues last season. I think one of the issues they had last season was offensive line. I mean, the offense as a whole was an issue. This was an offensive line last season that in conference play, they ranked 8th in the league in sacks allowed with 23. Overall, they gave up 30 sacks in overall numbers. So that's 8 sacks in non-conference play. So they kind of struggled in pass protection. They did not run the ball very well last season. They ran the ball for 111 yards per game in overall numbers. In conference play, they ran the ball for 114. So still not that great of a number in conference play. 3.1 yards per carry. They ran the ball almost 300 times. So it wasn't through lack of effort. You can look at multiple reasons why those numbers could be the way they are. But the offensive line was a weak link to an extent in this offense. So you're really looking at an offense that didn't really do a lot well and weren't really successful at what they did do well. And this is an offense that returns 5 guys that started at least one game, but they're losing some of their top guys on the O line. So you need to see this group develop and protect better. But to me, most of the issues Bama State had were more than just the offensive line not being on top of their game at all times. You're gonna have some issues that have to be worked out with quarterback play. running backs have taken a drop off due to guys leaving and receivers as well. So the offense could be a lot different this season. I expect this to be an offense that takes a few weeks to get going. I don't really see them being explosive early. Maybe they can get together as the season goes on, but it all starts with these guys up front being able to open up holes for the run game, which I feel like Bama State is going to try to run the ball more often than not with their offense and the type of quarterback that they have. Looking at Alcorn's offensive line took a big step forward last season. The previous year, their offensive line wasn't bad, but they weren't really what you would really look at as a Alcorn offensive line. In 2021, they were next to last in sacks allowed. They allowed 33 sacks the previous season. So they definitely did not do a good job of protecting quarterback. They did a little bit better this season. They cut that number down to 31. So they cut down a couple sacks off of that, but not, that they still, I still think they did a better job, even though the numbers don't reflect it in terms of sacks. But I think that, with a back like Jarvion Howard, he was able to erase a lot of mistakes that they had. And I think that they played better. The team was more physical as a whole last season. When you look at this team overall, they were fourth in the league in rushing, 175 yards per game, average 4.1 yards per carry. When you look at that number in conference play, they were 175 yards per game as well, and 4.1 yards per carry. So a really, really good running attack in conference play. You really can't top that. That's one of those things that when you look at those numbers like that, that a lot of it goes to the offensive line for opening up those holes. Yes, you got a big bruising back that can make his own things happen, but if you look at some of the big plays in games they lost, those were plays that the defensive line got a nice little push and made a key stop. If you look at the end of the Southern game, that came down to the D line winning against the offensive line. So they had a couple opportunities to kind of seal games and couldn't do it. But this offensive line, I think, is only gonna continue to get better. Again, you got a couple quarterbacks who can help this offense out. You got a great running back that's gonna make things erase, and you're returning a line that returns 5 guys that started at least one game. So there's a lot of veteran guys on this line, a lot of juniors and seniors. So they'll continue to get better. I prefer a line that's full of experienced guys. I mean, obviously, if you're looking toward the future, you want to have a line that's young that can grow together, but you can't have that every year. So I would prefer, if I'm looking at a 1-year situation, like this is my window, I need these guys to be here this year and be ready this year. I want a group of juniors and seniors that have been through the fire, and I think this is what Alcorn's line is. I think they're a very experienced group, and I think they'll reflect that. On the other side of things is Bethune-Cookman. This is an offensive line that doesn't have hardly anybody coming back. I mean, obviously there's a lot of defections from this team. I think they're bringing in over. I think last time I saw it, they're bringing in over 50 guys, new guys on the team at this point. The numbers are thin still. They returned they returned 2 guys that started at least one game. One of their offensive linemen actually transferred to Bama State. So they're gonna be starting over. This is ground zero. Now, how bad that is up in the air because this offensive line was not that good last season. Even with an offense that was pretty solid last season, this offense was last in sacks allowed at 42. Now, some of that is because they had a quarterback who was a runner, so sometimes he would probably get caught in situations trying to get out of the pocket. But this was an offense that was number five in total offense. They were number 8 in rushing offense, and they ranked number 3 in passing offense. So this was a very, very good offense. They did a really good job. They had a spurt during the middle of the season where they scored 30, 40, 50 points in a few consecutive weeks. They averaged 23.5 points per game. But the O-line really was not that great. So losing those kind of guys, you know, is that good or bad? I mean, obviously, like I said, you want the continuity, but when you got a bunch of guys who aren't really working that well together, how much of a problem is that if you lose those guys? This offense gave up 32 sacks in conference play, which was 11th in the league. So even when you get the conference play, they gave up a ton of sacks. But this is going to be I think, you can, like I keep saying, you can bring in all the guys you want, all the stars and all of this, but if that unit up front is not solid, it's going to be a struggle. And right now, I think this is going to be a line that is going to struggle because they're brand new all over. So I wouldn't really expect a whole lot from this offensive line at this point. Now, a line that I feel like is probably one of the best, if not the best, strictly, especially on an experience standpoint, is Florida A&M. They returned 7 guys who have started at least one game, including 4 guys who were in their routine starting 5. They're returning a lot of guys who have played a lot. And like I said, at least 4 out of the 5 key starters from last season are back. They had some injuries early. They get those guys back. This offensive line is gonna be solid. You look at some of the numbers for FAMU. We all know they did not run the ball well last season. They ran the ball for 94 yards per game overall, but they actually had the least amount of carries on the season. They carried the ball 346 times on the season. So not a lot of attempts. You know what I mean? They were one of only 3 teams who ran the ball less than 400 times in overall play. So they did not necessarily lean on the running game as much as you would expect. They ran the ball for under 250 times in conference play. Just not a lot of attempts. They averaged 3.1 yards per attempt, which was tied for last in conference play. But they did a good job of protecting the quarterback. They only allowed 14 sacks in conference play. Overall, they allowed 21 sacks overall. So really, really solid. That was second in the league in sacks allowed overall. So this line returns a lot of those guys, and even some of those key reserve guys. And a lot of guys had opportunity to play because of injury and because of some of the situations early that they had. They were able to get a lot of guys experience. You have 3 or 4 guys who weren't necessarily starters that got to start a game or 2. So this line is going to be experienced, and I think this line is going to be a key factor for this team. If they can commit to running the ball more, I think that numbers will be better. I don't think their lack of running numbers was because they didn't have the running backs or they didn't have the offensive line. Because if you look at the year before, when they had a capable back in Bishop Barnett, who they wanted to lean on, they were more than able to do that. So they may want to, they are pass happy, but I do think with the backs they have, if they commit to it, the numbers will go up. The passing numbers will go down a little bit, but the rushing numbers can go up a little bit if they chose to do that. And like I said, if you look at the number of carries they had on the season, then obviously they did not commit to the run as much as a lot of other people did. But it wasn't the offensive line fault at all on that. So I expect this. I said it on SWAC Smoke a few weeks ago. I think this is probably one of the best offensive lines in the league, if not the best. So I think that won't drop off at all this season. Looking at Grambling, Grambling is a team who returns 7 guys who have started at least one game this season. And this offensive line was really, really young last year. A lot of the guys that they played, 5 of those guys were at least um, freshmen or sophomores, so they were a very young offensive line. They returned at least 4 guys who started the bulk of their games, and 3 key reserve guys who started games. So when you look at those numbers, that's a good look. This team did not do a good job of protecting the quarterback, allowing 33 sacks in conference play, and they allowed 38 overall. So they didn't do a good job of protecting, but a lot of it is youth. You play so many freshmen and sophomores, you're gonna have those issues. This is another year for this team to grow together. Offensively, they should be better. Maybe with more stable quarterback play, you can be better. But this team was 5th in the league in rushing, in overall numbers at 167 yards per game, and 4.9 yards per carry, which was actually 3rd in the league in overall numbers. So they did a good job of running the ball. A lot of people say it's easier to run block than pass block, and when you got young guys, you can always just cut them loose and let them move, get upfield, and take guys out. The passing game was not great, but a lot of the issue was protection and young quarterbacks that were trying to develop and grow in the college game. So this line should be better this season, especially with these guys being a year older. Not necessarily needing to add a lot of pieces to this. You just need time. You just need time for these guys to grow and gel together and continue to play together. And I think that this offense will be better because of that. When you got young groups, no matter what position it is, when you got young groups, you're always going to have those growing pains. And sometimes when you got a younger offensive line, those growing pains are viewed a whole lot worse than other people. Another team who has brought in a lot of guys, and a lot of guys with ability, but returning numbers are few, and that's Jackson State. They basically lost the bulk of their offensive line through transfers and guys finished eligibility, but they return on this look. They return one guy that started at least a few games, but this team is turning over their roster, so you're gonna see this kind of thing happen. Now they're bringing in guys who I think have talent. They're definitely bringing in guys with size and ability. So it's gonna be time for this offensive line to gel. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. I'm not saying that they're gonna be bad or nothing like that. And hey, who knows? Maybe this is the group that can can change that notion. But this is a team I think will be a lot better later than early. I'm not saying they're gonna be bad early. I'm not saying they're gonna lose all their games early. So anybody who want to flip out on that kind of stuff because somebody's saying something about Jackson State, you can simmer down. But it's gonna there may be some ugly games early. I mean, I'm not saying losses, but this team at the beginning is not gonna be this team at the end, and it's gonna be because this line has to develop and play together. And a lot of guys don't have a lot of snaps under their belt, and that comes with time. I mean, there's reps and time. It's gonna take time, and that goes for anybody's unit. But when you lose a lot of guys and you bring in a lot of guys, it's gonna take time. So it's kind of hard to look at what this offensive line did last year compared to what they're gonna do this year. But this was a very efficient offense last season, the best offense in the league last season in almost every aspect, short of rushing, which they were still 7th in the league. So this was an offense that was very explosive, led the league in scoring. How close they can get to those numbers this season, a lot of it is going to depend on how this offensive line does early in the season. Because I think by mid-season, I think this offensive line will start to round in the form because they did bring in a lot of talented guys. It's just going to take some time for them to get together and make some things happen. Looking at Valley, this is another offensive line that brought back a lot of guys. They have 7 guys who have started at least one game, 3 guys who were potential key starters, including one guy who missed a lot of time with an injury at the beginning of the season. So you get him back. and one of your best offensive linemen coming back off of injury. Valley is, Valley's a team who, again, new offense, new system, new coaches. This offense wasn't, they weren't good last season. There's no real way to really sugarcoat it. They gave up 35 sacks on the season overall. In conference play, they gave up 28. So they definitely did not, they did not protect well. The running game really was not as good as it probably should have been. They were ninth in the league in rushing overall, and basically last in the league in passing offense. Total offense, they were around the bottom. They were dead last in total offense, and they were last in scoring offense at 14.5 points per game. And when you look at conference play wise, they scored 16. So their numbers went up slightly in conference play, but they still were around the bottom in most metrics. Last in total offense in conference play. They were 8th in rushing offense in conference play, and they were last in passing offense in conference play. So this offense, even with a line that was made up of veteran guys, they just couldn't really get it done. A lot of, there's a lot of piecemealing of a line like this, even with guys that are juniors and seniors, a lot of guys are JUCO guys and, guys who hadn't really played together a lot. So, that kind of dispels the fact that just because you are a senior laden group that you're not necessarily always going to be the best. So they definitely are going to have some growing pains still. They return some guys who are very capable, but they're still going to struggle to make things happen, especially with a new staff. But we'll continue to see how Valley develops. Another line that I think that was very solid last year and was honestly one of the most solid and consistent lines in the last couple of years is Prairie View. They continue to return a lot of guys. They bring back 6 guys who started at least one game, including the majority of their starting offensive line is back. They return a couple guys off the bench who have started games. And this was offense that took a big step in the run game last season, leading the league in rushing with over almost 240 yards per game in conference play. Overall, they averaged 233 in overall numbers. 5.2 yards per carry was led the league, and in conference play they averaged 5 yards per carry. They led the league in sacks allowed. They allowed 11 sacks in conference play, 14 overall. So they definitely did a good job of protecting the quarterback. Now, this was an offense that didn't really throw the ball a lot. They only attempted 153 passes, which was by far the least in the conference. That was almost 30 attempts less than the team with the second fewest. So they didn't really attempt a lot of passes, but they ran the ball a ton, and they opened up a ton of holes. I mean, they had 2 backs and the quarterback that ran the ball extremely well last season. So that a lot of those guys return. I would like to see a little bit more commitment to the passing game. I'm not saying you got to throw the ball, 400 times on the season, but 180, 200. I think you'll probably get a little bit better balance out of the offense that way. But what they do it well, and bringing in a guy like Caleb Johnson to add to that mix is only going to make you run the ball a little bit more, which I like this offensive line to be able to do. Like I said, they run block and they run block well. This team ran the ball 380 times in conference play, which was almost 30 times more than Southern, who was the second place team. Overall, they ran the ball almost 500 times. Again, almost 20 times more than the second team, who was Southern. So they want to run the ball. They're gonna run the ball. They're gonna run it. They're gonna run it, and they do a good job of opening up holes. So I think this line is on par with FAMU. I don't think they get a lot of attention and credit for what they do because this team is kind of up and down record wise. But that offensive line has been very consistent and they've been together a while. And this is going to be another solid year for this offensive line. I would love to see them get more attention for the work that they do. Another offensive line that's been solid for years that's going to go through a little transition is Southern. They returned 6 guys that started at least one game. They do lose some big pieces on the offensive line because this Southern's offensive line was a very cohesive unit going back to like 2016, 2015. You know, they had like a rotation of guys from then to like 2021. Different guys, obviously, but just a continuation of guys that grew together in the system. And, you know, a lot of those guys took advantage of that extra year that everybody got and were able to stick around for the 2021 season. You know, you had a guy like Tyree Carter, who went to the NFL in 2021. You had, you know, Brian Williams and Dallas Black, Jeremiah Stafford, those kind of guys who were very solid offensive linemen, all SWAC type guys who were able to stay around a little bit longer. Those guys are gone now. There is some, you know, there are some guys who started games last season, but you know that continuity is going to be new. You know, this line is you know going to be more of a newer unit. Again, Southern was a team like Prairie View that liked to run the football over almost 360 attempts in conference play, 4.5 yards per carry, 180 yards per game on the ground in conference play. Overall numbers similar, 480 for 2,423 yards, 5 yards per carry, 201 yards overall. They struggled a bit in protecting the quarterback, although in Southern's case, some of that was on the quarterback. You had a quarterback who took some sacks that he probably should not have taken. A young quarterback, you know, that was still gathering college experience. You're going to go through those kind of growing pains. Southern allowed 27 sacks in overall, which put them directly in the middle of the rankings. In conference play, they gave up 22, I believe it was. Which again, 22 sacks, which again is like in the middle, like 7th place. And those 22 sacks come in 9 games. So, you know, that's a little bit more than 2 a game. So they gave up some sacks, but they did a good job with opening up the run game. The passing game wasn't spectacular, but it was, you know, adequate. You would love to see it be better. They threw the ball for about 185 yards in conference play, so under 200, I think, in overall as well. But you would like to see those numbers get better. But this team, if they're going to be who they are, their running game is going to be where their bread is buttered at. And the offensive line should be able to continue to do that and keep this team on the move. Again, a nice mix of young guys and older guys, but they just got to gel together. So with so many new starters, again, this is an offensive line that's probably going to look better later than early. That's not good if you're a Southern fan because Southern has a lot of tough defenses early in their schedule. So it may not be pretty, but by the end of the season, the offensive line should be better. At least that's what you hope. Texas Southern is a team who lost a key guy in Drake Centers, but they returned 6 guys who started at least one game. This is another offensive line that's really young. They bring back a lot of guys who started. A lot of the key starters are coming back. The reserves are young. This team, you got to remember, is a team that was like majority freshmen like a couple years ago. So this is a team full of, you know, juniors and redshirt sophomores, redshirt juniors. You know, a lot of guys who are now becoming older guys together. This offensive unit is growing together. Your quarterback is a junior. Your running backs are like juniors. You know, this offensive line is, you know, juniors and seniors now. So this offense, it took a big explosive step in 2021. Last season, I think I don't want to say it took a step back, but it wasn't as explosive as it could have been, especially in the passing game. The running game was still really good. The running game was 4th in the league in conference play at 174 yards per game. The numbers passing wise were lower. They only threw the ball 145 yards per game in conference play, but this team averaged 4.2 yards per carry overall. They ran the ball for an average of 4.3 yards per carry and 177 yards per game, with third overall in rushing. Like I said, passing wise, they were 167 yards per game, and they allowed 23 sacks overall, which was fourth in the league in conference play. They allowed 19 sacks, which was fifth in the league. So they did a really good job of protecting the quarterback. And when you got a quarterback that is mobile, sometimes guys can take sacks, but they did a really good job of protecting Andrew Body and opening the holes for Owens and Howard and Body as well. So this offensive line is going to be a very, very key factor in this team possibly winning the West Division. They're going to be one of the better offensive lines in the league. They're definitely an unknown unit. Most people offensive lines are unknown units, but I think Texas Southern offensive line and offense period is underrated by a lot of people because the name Texas Southern. I don't think they get the respect that they deserve for the work that they put in and the growth that these guys have put in to grow year by year together. And they're just taking that next step and being able to have a line that sticks together, even though you're losing a huge piece, is going to be a very vital part in this team. And our last unit on this list is Pine Bluff. When you look at this team and you look at their numbers, it wasn't pretty. This was a team that wasn't pretty, but they did a decent job of protecting the quarterback. They were sixth in sacks allowed overall. Conference play with 20. Overall, they allowed 27 sacks, which was tied for sixth place. They had the best individual offensive lineman in the league in Mark Evans. A lot of other guys were young, so this was a really weird mix. Like one really good veteran guy and a lot of guys who were getting better, but they were young. This team was able to run the ball decently in conference play. They ran the ball for like 141 yards. The bulk of that came from Kayvon Britton, but the passing game was up and down. Multiple quarterbacks played. Nobody really stood out, but the offensive line was actually pretty solid. They weren't great. They weren't bad either. And a lot of those guys come back. So new offense, new coaches, just like Valley, Bethune-Cookman, Jackson State, new guys coming in. They returned a lot of guys. At least 5 guys have started at least one game. A couple guys that are reserves have got some starts. So they returned some experience, but you're losing a key guy. You're losing a guy who was an all-conference guy, NFL type of guy. That spot is going to be tough to fill. It's probably going to take a while for somebody to step into their role. Maybe multiple guys, but this team is going to be an up and down team because they're young all over the place. You're losing you're losing your only real playmaker on your offense, and you're bringing in a lot of new guys. So can they develop as the season goes on? That's going to be the key factor to see in this team. So again, I think the offensive lines are a lot more promising in the conference than the quarterbacks are, at least on paper. Because even when you take a team like Jackson State that doesn't return a lot of guys, they're bringing in a lot of talented guys, a lot of guys with good size and good ability, but it's just going to take time for them to gel together. There's only one real offensive line with huge question marks, and that they are even in the same boat because that's Bethune-Cookman. They're even in the same boat because they're bringing in so many guys. It's going to take a while to find their right unit. So it's not even necessarily that offensive line is bad or going to be bad. It's just they don't have the experience together. They don't have the guys. They don't know who they have right now. So I think the offensive line play, in at least in league play, is going to be a lot better than the quarterback play. I think that's going to make a lot of teams at least be contenders as the rest of the offense starts to gel around them. So a lot better outlook at offensive line than any other unit, honestly, other than maybe running back in on the offensive side of the ball. So just wanted to take a quick look at the O lines and see where they stood. We'll probably have another video like this where we look at special teams. That's another unit that most people don't really talk about. So we'll probably be back with that. Y'all make sure y'all hit that subscription button, like the video, and we'll catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.